Morning. I'm off to St Albans today for a meeting of a mass consumer organisation of whom I'm one of the 140,000 members. Organisation that was set up 55 years ago by four men who were drinking in a pub in Dublin when they resolved that British beer had become a bit crap and that something ought to be done about it. They initially resolved to call this the Campaign for the Revitalisation of Ale, then realised this would be a bit difficult to pronounce after a few beers, and instead went for the Campaign for Real Ale, CAMRA. The real ale that they were campaigning for was traditional British ale, delivered live to the pub in a cask and continuing to ferment. The enemies were the big brewing companies who had emerged from a whole series of mergers and takeovers. Old breweries had been closing, old beers were vanishing. Britain's drinkers were being served homogeneous, safe, predictable beers, which, quite a lot of undiscerning beer drinkers quite liked, but that's not the point. Beers for whom much more effort had gone into the marketing than the production. The byword for everything that was wrong with British beer was the infamous Watney's Red Barrel. These despised beers were stored in receptacles called kegs. Now, try and see how much vitriol you can cram into that single syllable, and you've taken your first step into the world of CAMRA. CAMRA's main goal was to safeguard traditional cask ale, and they succeeded. It's doing really well. Hold that thought. It matters, and it's ultimately why I joined and why I stayed. Like any organisation of slightly obsessive British men, some women did get involved as well, they have been gently mocked from the beginning. Real ale tended to get brigaded with train spotting and non-league football as slightly eccentric British pastimes. Then as time went on, the CAMRA diehards suffered the further indignity of getting old, and as can happen, they opened themselves up to the accusation of not recognising that the world had changed since 1971. Some came over as Luddite, condemning all new beer technology. Some followed a line of argument that I personally get quite squeamish about, that cask ale is the only indigenous British beer and must always be championed against foreign influences. This led to some highly public spats with the emerging American-influenced craft beer movement. I should emphasise there were lots of decent people on both sides calling for peaceful coexistence, but hey, a shouting match is much more newsworthy. CAMRA has moved on since the days when its chair, Colin Valentine, denounced the craft beer bloggerati at its 2011 conference. It shows a much more conciliatory face. I wanted to go along to the annual conference and see for myself. Okay, here we are in St Albans, outside the Alban Arena now. The action isn't really underway yet. I think the AGM may be going on inside, but it's an absolutely gorgeous day, so I'm going to have a quick look around St Albans before I settle down in the conference. Okay, I've arrived in St Albans. It is an absolutely beautiful day, and I'm in a very beautiful part of the city before I get diving into all of the beer politics. I am very near the cathedral, and this thing behind me is the Vintry Garden. I'm just going to have a little explore. Right by the cathedral now. I mean, gosh, how's this? It's pretty impressive, yeah? Now, obviously, churchyard, you look at the gravestones, and here's one. There's a familiar name, and I must admit I didn't know that he was Bishop of St Albans before he became Archbishop of Canterbury, so you always learn stuff out here. And behind me now is the Abbey Gateway, which is the only surviving bit of the medieval St Albans Abbey. This dates from 1362. St Albans School, also there, nice little venue for a school. And next to it, there's the place where martyrs, both Catholic and Protestants, were burned at various times. So the Abbey Gate, built in 1362, was actually attacked by the Peasants' Revolt in 1381, and there's another place in the centre of town where John Bull, one of the leaders of the Peasants' Revolt, was tried by Richard II before he was executed. So there is a lot of history going on here, basically. Now time for lunch. Unfortunately, there's an absolutely cracking food court in town. I'm just waiting for my very nice looking Philly cheesesteak from these guys. So just eating my Philly cheesecake. Sorry I couldn't film while I was doing it because it's probably as it was with toucans, the messiest thing I've ever eaten, but also incredibly delicious. So this, if you're ever in St Albans, I think it's the third Saturday of every month. The whole market and this food court is amazing. They have okay, it's lunchtime here now. The formal AGM is done. The main conference starts in about an hour and a quarter. So if you're CAMRA, what do you do when you've got an hour and a quarter free before something happens? Well, they played on a bar. So I got my glass. This is a local Hertfordshire golden ale. You buy these tickets to stop faffing around at the bar. So I'm in what's effectively the beer garden, and because of the glass that they gave me is from Tring Brewery, I figured I'd get a Tring Brew beer next, which is the mild. CAMRA's always had quite an attraction to preserving mild as a beer style that's been under attack, and yeah, it's really nice. Now this one is Strong Heart, which is the strong ale from McMullen's of Hertford. 7%, and you can tell, so I've only got a third of it. But anyway, this bar is doing really, really good business. It's so lucky that they've got a nice day. Everyone's having a good time. Clearly, a lot of people catching up with friends. This is CAMRA in its essence, I think. Take a look and see. Now this one, it's historically significant. It's a pale ale by a brewery called Baron from Buntingford, which is sort of in between Hertford and Cambridge. It's up the A10. Oh yeah, that is one powerful set of hops in there. There's a good combo. And the reason this is historically significant is that it is actually stored in a keg and dispensed from a keg. And time being, even to contemplate such a thing in the deepest recesses of your mind would have got you driven out of here by people waving pitchforks and flaming torches. But it's here, and just as well because it's really nice. And I've had other Baron stuff before, and they've been really, really good. So maybe Glasnost is a thing. Maybe. So we're now in the hall where the members are assembling. It's a really good turnout, actually. Going to fill this theatre, I think, quite comfortably. And this is the afternoon session with the motions for debate, of which the first one is brought forward by Roger Protz, who's kind of one of the grand old men of CAMRA, has been there from the outset, who is going to be making an impassioned appeal for the Great British Beer Festival to be revived, because it's not being run this year, having made a loss last year. So, really interested to see how that goes. Hi, so the day is done. There was the afternoon session overran. It went on for longer than I thought. The highlight was a really interesting exchange, quite a poignant one, on the question of the Great British Beer Festival, which was a classic Hearts versus Heads. So the Hearts was led by Roger Protz saying, "Come on, look, we really need a Great British Beer Festival," and the Heads was Ian from the National Exec saying, "Look, it really just doesn't work anymore." And now, eventually, it's coming back to the National Executive next year with lessons learned from why the 2025 Great British Beer Festival in Birmingham lost money. But what was going on was this was very much about the sort of heart and soul of CAMRA right there, and how to try and keep the spirits of CAMRA going in the face of very straitened financial circumstances. So it was really interesting. I was really glad that I was there, and generally really glad that I came today. So it's on again tomorrow, but probably not coming back. I think I've seen and heard enough. So this half pint of stout finishes off my last tokens exactly, and that will then be it. And I will be catching a train back to London. So Beermeister over and out. So back on the boat, and just a few reflections on my weekend spent with CAMRA. I'll be writing these up probably in more detail in the blog. I did have a good time. I really did. It was very interesting to experience the conference, and well done to the organising committee. St Albans, absolutely lovely place, and to do it on the same day as the market was a really smart move. And the sun was out, which I appreciate wasn't the organising committee's doing, but it made for a really good day. A lot of the conference was a bit frustrating because it was so indisciplined. There was the endless debate about whether the winner of the Pub of the Year award should be Pub of the Year for the year ahead or Pub of the Year for the year back. We spent ages on that and on a couple of other things which were sort of rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic. The By contrast, I thought the debate on Great British Beer Festival was really important and useful because it really brought to a head the passion of some of the members and the importance that GBBF has for them, but an equally passionate response from the exec to say, look, we just can't carry on doing this. We are in a very bad financial position, and these events cannot be made to make money. I think the most important bit of the conference, though, was the disciplinary hearing that we ended up deciding, as is still under the rules of CAMRA. A member's expulsion was confirmed. They'd been expelled for inappropriate behaviour. They appealed to the conference in person, and the conference voted to uphold that expulsion. I'd better be careful about how much more I say, because obviously, it was done in private. The member has rights. But the following morning, it was a really cathartic moment when I was tuning into the live stream. There were female CAMRA members saying, this was a real CAMRA has changed moment. Stuff that we had to put up with when we were coming through, it looks like the organisation will no longer put up with. And that is really great and necessary. So, yeah, important moment. Just a couple of final reflections. I thought that so CAMRA's in this difficult position. It's got this, and it still does have the challenge of safeguarding the future of really good British beer on a large scale, which is not guaranteed and is definitely worth fighting for. In an ideal world, CAMRA would be a bit smarter about who its targets were and who it allied with. It's great that CAMRA now tolerates high quality artisan keg beer. It would be wonderful if it actively celebrated it without just getting its collective corporate knickers in a twist about the words craft beer, as it still clearly does. And also, I think the whole approach to the mega brewers. So I've said this before, not everything done, even by AB InBev, is bad. And there is something about engagement and working and not constantly just making it feel that CAMRA's role is to snipe at them. So, reflections. There we go. Fun weekend. See you soon.